for us this morning. I want to break off. We had started a series of sermons, Life Under the Sun. But I'm going to change it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, however long it takes. The sermon series is called Finishing the Fight. Finishing the Fight. Turn with me in your Bibles, if you would, to the Gospel of Mark chapter 5, starting with verse 21. It is a story about a woman with an issue of blood. We talked about the demoniac last week. Now he's on the other side of the shore of Galilee. So we want to look at Mark chapter 5, verse 21. And I just want to use for a subject this morning, who touched me? I thought about just believe, but we live in a world today that is inundated with false teachers claiming to have healing ministries, that they can perform miracles at their choosing. And oftentimes they go back to Isaiah 53:12 and say, by his stripes we are healed. That text has absolutely nothing to do with the healing of an individual. That is a spiritual healing. If that's the case, no one would ever die. They use that text out of context. God is all powerful, and through our prayers and God's choosing, he can heal whomever he wished. But no one has power in and of themselves to heal. God is still very much in control. He's still on the throne. God is still in the healing business. If that was the case, and if I could heal at will, then I would not have people to come to me. I would go to them. Amen. I would go to the hospitals. I would go to the nursing home. I heal everybody in Jacksonville, and I go to surrounding areas in countries. But this is a story of Jairus. He comes to Jesus because his precious daughter is sick. Now the word daughter, she's 12 years old. Now, you know, at 13 is when they become an adult. She's able to marry. She's able to have children. So really, this is not a little girl. Just like saying my 17-year-old, one more year, the child will be an adult. But he says my little daughter, 12 years old, and she's dying. And Jesus turns and goes with him. And there comes an emergency revealed that a woman who had hemorrhage for 12 years, this woman reached out by faith and touched Jesus, and she was healed. With all the people that are pressing and pushing, Jesus stops and says, who touched me? Jesus performed the greatest miracle in this woman's life. And as he does this, you got to remember, here is the text. Jairus is standing there, and he watches Jesus turn and heal this woman while his child is dying. Now the parallel text, Luke said the child was dead. Matthew said the child was dead. Luke says that she was at the point of death, and Matthew here, Mark here, says that she was dying as well. So the child was sick, and as he was on his way to his house, there was an interruption. This lady comes along with a serious problem, and in the midst of his child is sick. There's 4 things I want us to consider as we think on the subject, who touched me. First, I want us to notice is the desperate condition recorded. The second thing is the delay carefully reviewed. Thirdly is the devastating communication revealed. And fourthly is the dead child that is raised. But notice first the desperate conditions recorded then, verses 21 through 24. Verse 21, notice the circumstances here, detailed. Verse 21, and it says, and when Jesus was passed over again by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. Now Jesus goes from the eastern shore to the western shore. Now first he was on the western shore. He went to the eastern shore. You remember the story of the demoniac, the man that was demon possessed. And to make the narrative short, there was demons in the man. He called himself legions. He cast the demons out. They went into the pigs, and the pig careened off of the side of the cliff and died, and they were upset. You know, like you said, that's a whole lot of pork chops. 2,000 pigs. I don't know how many pork chops are in one pig, but however many that is times 2,000, that's a lot of 4,000 ribs. You know, that's a lot of that's a lot of food. So they wanted to run Jesus out of the country. So Jesus comes back over to the other side where he comes from, and guess what? The crowd is still there waiting. And I believe so often we have a problem where we're more concerned about animals, money, power, prestige than we are about Jesus. Because he said that the man was clothed, sitting at the feet of Jesus in his right mind. But they was concerned about the animals per se than about the man being healed. Now there are two people in this text that Jairus, he's waiting for Jesus to heal his daughter. And there is an unnamed woman with an issue of blood. So you have one that is a religious leader in a synagogue. You got one that is excommunicated out of the synagogue. You got one is revered and one is rejected. So often we can pray and plead with God, and it appears that God is nowhere to be found. But I come this morning to assure you that God is not unconcerned, nor is God asleep when it comes to our situation. God is still seated on the throne, and God is still in control. Yes. David said he's a very present help in the time of trouble, but not only the circumstances detailed, but notice the confidence displayed there in verse 22. Three things about this man. First of all, he was daring. Look at verse 22. And it says, and behold, that means to stop, look intently. There cometh one, the ruler of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, speaking of Jesus, he, speaking of Jairus, fell at his feet. Now, Jairus was a ruler of the synagogue, not necessarily was a preacher, but maybe Jairus was there. He was the administrator of the synagogue. He made sure that everything was in order, make sure the synagogue was clean and ready to go. But he was a leader in the synagogue. And notice that most of the time that these religious leaders, they hated Jesus because they felt that they were more religious, they were more knowledgeable, they had more prestige than Jesus. Jesus was just a carpenter's son. He didn't have the letters behind his name. He wasn't Reverend Dr. Jesus. He didn't come from an Ivy League school. He didn't sit at the feet of Gamaliel. He didn't go to the school of the prophets. This man was simply the carpenter's son. But it's one thing about Jairus. He was just a lonely man searching for healing. He was not afraid to be seen with Jesus. He was not afraid what the other rabbis would say. He was not ashamed. You remember Nicodemus? Nicodemus came to Jesus by night because he was more concerned about what they were going to say than what Nicodemus had to say to Jesus. And most folks are like that today. They are ashamed of the gospel. You know, we get in places where we know we ought to stand up for those that go to the barbershop. That's a good place. There's always something either religious or political being said in the barbershop, and most folks, they'll sit there and won't say anything when it comes to religious matters. But I want us to notice that he came to Jesus. Yes, he was not afraid. It was because of his absolute desperation he fell at the feet of Jesus. Notice his decision there. It was in total humility. He was at the point that he didn't care what others thought about him, whether or not they would kick him out the synagogue or the goose or got loose club. He didn't care what anybody thought. He went to Jesus and he bowed at his feet. He wasn't concerned about folks, what they had to say, or whether or not they were going to put him out of the synagogue. He wanted his child healed. Many people have lost the true meaning of worship. What is called the right of first mention or the right of first passage, that simply means however the word is used, the first time it's used, it carries the same meaning throughout the entirety of the text unless it is changed. The first time the word worship was used in Genesis chapter 22, it was when Abraham said, I'm going to take my son Isaac up on the mountain and we're going to worship. Now let me inform you, first of all, there was no church there. There was no deacon, no deaconesses. There was no trustees. There was no choir, no praise team. There was no sermon. So worship is not about jumping around, back and forth, rolling all over the floor in the church. That is not worship. Worship is when we pay homage and respect to Jesus Christ. It's not what we do physical. It's what we do spiritually on the inside. So many folks have lost the true meaning of worship. It is not like the Pentecostal movement believe that it's speaking in tongues and running around in the church. Last time I checked, there wasn't no tongues being spoke as he laid his son on the wood to sacrifice him unto the Lord. There was no church. There's only reverence, respect, humility before God. But many think because they come to church that they're worshiping God. See, this man could have been, have the mindset of the people today that, I care about my reputation. You remember when you was in high school? We used to always say, I got a rep to protect. I care about I care about what I don't care now, less what folks think about me now. But then I cared about what they thought about me, so I would do certain things or I wouldn't do it in their presence. But oftentimes we are more concerned about our reputation or what people think about us more than we are about our relationship with God. You remember the rich young ruler? Jesus told him to sell all he had and follow me. He said, no, can't do that. I love my money more than I love the master. But we have folks like that. But notice his desire in 23 and 24. And it said, and he besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, and she may be healed, and she shall live. Now it says, and he besought him greatly. He didn't just say, Lord, my child is sick. That's how it is. It's like to beg, to plead with him a long while. It wasn't just, my child is sick, please, Lord, can you come and help her? And that was all. But it said it besought him greatly, saying, he says, my little daughter. But little should not be in the text, but it describes the relationship that he had with his child. His daughter. Somehow we know somehow he knew what Jesus can do. He knew that Jesus could go. He knew that Jesus could go in and heal his child. Here's a desperate man needing his needs met. He's hopeless, desperate, standing before God, and he voices his deepest desire that his child be healed. See, he had faith that Jesus could heal his child. But notice that he didn't come with piety. He didn't come with position, nor did he come with power, but he came in absolute humility. So often we come to Jesus thinking that we don't have to cast off our pride, and we come to Jesus with our chest stuck out as if he owes us something. But notice he came and he kneeled at Jesus' feet in humility in order to meet his needs. He didn't come and say, I am the king of Zamunda. I am the king. I'm over the synagogue. I'm the reverend bishop. He didn't come that way. He simply bowed at the feet of Jesus. See, all the time we feel like we have to cast off our pride and our titles and all of this. He didn't say anything. He just bowed at his feet before he began to speak. He came to get his needs met. He came with a humble heart. And listen, he did not say, you know, son, I need for you to go get the crowd. I know, go get the camera. I want you to go put it on Facebook Live. You know, I'm going to go to your house, but I want you to put this on social media. I want the whole world to see. He simply turned and he went with him. A lot of times we got everything we got to do. We got to put it on social media. You know, we got to show our food before we ate it, after we ate it, and when we regurgitate it. You know, we've got to show all of this. We put all of our business on Facebook and then get mad when somebody comment on it. You know, we tell folks, you know, I'm leaving. I'm going out of town. I'm at the airport. Wheels up in 20 minutes. You breaking my house. Okay, now I'm back. I'm back at the airport. Wheels up 20 minutes. We'll be in Jacksonville in 45 minutes. You know, we put all of our business out there. But notice he simply turned and he went with Jairus to his house. Believers should come with the broken and the contrite heart, with the mindset of, God, I can't, but you can. That ought to be our mindset. But we're talking from the subject, who touched me? We see the desperation, the desperate condition recorded. But I want us to notice the delay carefully revealed in verse 25 through 34 here. Now, here's a man that has a daughter who's like Matthew say, is dying, is dead. Luke said is dying. Mark says she's at the point of death. But here comes a woman out of desperation with a physical condition. Now, mind you, that Jairus have made it to Jesus. There's a crowd around him. He's gotten his attention. He said, my daughter, 12 years old, is dying. I need for you to come lay hands on my daughter. And Jesus said, bet, let's go. On their way there's a delay. And you know, I don't know about you, but I hate delays. You know, oftentimes I'm on my way to work, I'm late. You know, you come around the corner, if anybody know where Commonwealth Post Office is, I get there, a train on the track. You know, there's a delay. Anybody ever was on their way to work and, you know, you come around 295, got to cross the Buckman Bridge. As soon as you hit Orange Park, you see the traffic. You know, sometimes we have delays in our life. Now, a delay is not always a bad thing. Right. You know, sometimes it's a good thing. And I often thought, you know, one day I was driving and I missed the turn. I had to go down, come back around, and I said, well, Lord, what would happen if I would have made that turn? You know, sometimes delays are not always bad, but I'm pretty sure we personally I don't even like to be interrupted. Remember now, they was on their way to Jesus to heal his daughter, and they was interrupted. It's just like when you're eating food and you interrupted, or you're watching your favorite show and you get interrupted. I don't know about you, when I'm watching football, I don't like to be interrupted. But listen to the condition described, verse 25, 26, and 27. And it was a certain woman which had an issue of blood for 12 years. Now notice, she had an issue of blood for 12 years. And this man had a daughter that was 12 years old. Now, I'm pretty sure they didn't know each other, and I'm not big on numerology. I'm not going to take 12 and 12 to 24. That's 12. That's 2 years. It simply was 12. The child was 12, and she had the issue of blood for 12 years. That's it. People want to take numerology and go to seed and want to make something out of this because there's 2 12s. It's simply 2 12s. Just so happened to be that both of them had the issue dealing with the 12 in each case. But verse 25, and it says, and there was a certain woman which had an issue of blood for 12 years, and she suffered many things and many physicians, and she spent all she had, and was nothing better, but rather got worse. When she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind and touched his garment. Now Jesus is there with Jairus, and he said, okay, Jairus, let's go. Show me. They have cars and GPS. So he said, Jairus, show me where you live. Let's go. There's a large crowd, and it says that they were pressing him, and that word pressing there gives you the idea of suffocation. It was so many people that were around him. It was as if they were thronging him, as if to suffocate him. I don't know if you ever been, I remember when Tiffany and I, we were young, we conned our uncle and taking us to the Prince and Rick James concert. And he was furious. See, we really didn't know we wanted to go to the concert. But you ever been at a concert and you in a crowd, and it doesn't matter which way you want to go, you got to go in the direction in which the crowd is going, because everybody is jammed up like sardines. All you got to do is get somewhere in the club and let somebody squeeze off a couple rounds and see what happens. Just please don't fall, because you'll be trying. Everybody is going one direction. Only thing you can do is go with the crowd. So you got to imagine now the crowd is going, and it says she came, in the Luke text says she came up from behind, and she wiggled her way through the crowd to get to Jesus. The crowd was large, and they was pushing, and in the midst of the crowd was a woman with a serious condition. Now she was pushing and pressing and trying to get to Jesus. But let me show you several things about this woman. First of all, her problem. In verse 25, she had an incurable disease. She was hemorrhaging, which was slowly destroying her life. There's a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. But before, there was no hope. But now there is hope. She heard about this man by the name of Jesus, and she believed that if I could get to Jesus, I can be healed. She realized that Jesus was the answer to her prayers. Not Dr. Phil, not Oprah, not some of the gurus that we call up today, your psychologists and psychiatrists. That she realized that Jesus was the answer, that he's a waymaker, he's a bridge over troubled water. Mama and them used to say he's a lawyer in a courtroom, he's a doctor in a sick room, he's a mother to the motherless, he's a father to the fatherless. He's Dr. Jesus. But not only her problem, but notice her pain, it says, and she went from doctor to doctor, and she was in pain, hoping that the doctors were able to heal her. But her poverty says that she was in constant pain, and as a result of going from doctor to doctor, she had spent, past tense, not spending, spent. That's past tense. That means I'm out of money now. I done went to every doctor, that there is, and now I done spent all of my money. Now I am in poverty. I am dead broke because of doctors. People have to file bankruptcy because of doctors and medical bills. The amount of medicine is ridiculous. You'll go get a Tylenol. I ain't going to talk about U.S. Health because, let's say Baptist. $500 for a Tylenol. I know that's kind of exaggerated, but you get my point. You can get a bottle of Tylenol for maybe about $5 or $6, but every Tylenol it'd be $5 to $10 per Tylenol. Some of the medication is totally off the chart. But this lady said she had spent all, so now she's living in poverty. Notice her perplexity. It says not only did she go from doctor to doctor, but everything grew. It didn't get better. It got worse. No one could find the problem. According to the law, that she was ceremonially unclean. She was not allowed to worship because she had an issue of blood. I'm not going to dig that well. I think we all understand what her situation was. So not only was she ceremonially unclean, but it was impossible for her to have a relationship with a man. So her whole life was put on hold for 12 long years. She had no relationship with the master, and she could not have a relationship with a man. because she had an issue. She went from doctor to doctor and doctor and doctor, and no one could find the problem, and she began to grow worse. But notice the pressing there in verse 27, and it says, and when she had heard of Jesus, came into the press. That's the crowd, the group of people from behind, and touched it. You know, at any time it could be from 50 to 100 people around Jesus. Now, how hard is it for you to come from the back and wiggle your way through all these people to get to Jesus? So she was pretty persistent. Now, we don't know how she heard. Didn't say how, it just says she heard. Oikos. That means to hear with the understanding of heeding and believing. Listen, just like Rahab the harlot, she heard about the God of Israel. Now, how she heard, it does not say, but it's our job to spread the word that they might hear. But she knew Jesus was there. And but she didn't even know how to get to him. She didn't even know if she got to Jesus that Jesus can heal her. But she didn't allow anybody or anyone to stop her from getting to Jesus. Not even a family member or a friend can stop her. Today we have all kind of excuses to why we can't come to church. But I guarantee you, we go to work in inclement weather, sick, dead, and let's work at the post office. We got a little leeway. But on most jobs, you know, you may miss 1 or 2 days in 5 years. But we make, when it comes to God and it comes to church, we begin to make excuses as to why we can't get there. But when our sense of desperation, when it becomes so desperate and we understand that Jesus is our only help and our only way, there's no devil in hell will stop us from getting to church. I don't care if you don't have a car. You'll catch 5 buses and walk 20 miles to get to the house of worship if you know that was your only hope. Doesn't matter how late you stayed up last night. Doesn't matter what other people say. You're going to make it to church. Her priorities had just changed. She was dependent on the doctors, but now she's dependent on the doctor, the great physician, Jesus. Now, she wanted to get to Jesus. First of all, she wanted to get to other doctors. She went from this doctor and this doctor, but now she wanted to get to Jesus. You know, without excuse, this unknown, unnamed woman, part of the crowd. Now, Jairus is the man of power, and you know, she may have thought that he's more important than me. He's the ruler of the synagogue. And I'm just one excommunicated out of the synagogue. Why should God care about me? Many have the mindset that Jesus does not care about them. He doesn't care about anybody. Jesus cares for you and for me. 1 Peter 5 and 7 said, cast your cares upon me, because Jesus loves us. He loves each and every one of us. I don't care. That's from the pew, from the pulpit to the pew to the parking lot. It's everybody. It's not just a big I, little you. There is no barriers when it comes to Jesus. Just because you got a big salary, you got a job, no job, you're living in the White House or the outhouse, it does not matter. Jesus Christ loves everyone. But she could have had the mindset that I'm not important. I'm not going to even trouble the master. But it doesn't matter who you are, this unnamed, unknown woman. Jesus cares for you. He left heaven and came down to earth to die on the cross for you and for I. So what's your excuse? Well, most folks might say, I don't like big crowds. You know, I don't like crowds. I just don't do that. And you know, Jesus doesn't care about me. I'm a nobody. But what excuses do we make when it's time to come to church, when it's time to study the word, when it's time to be in the presence of God? Do we make excuses? But not only the condition described, but notice the cure that's directed there in 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. But notice there in verse 28, and it says, for, that's where God, because she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be made whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. See, we see her real faith. If I could just touch it, she didn't say touch his body. She said touch his clothes. It's attached to her body. Some people might say this is some form of superstition, to say that, okay, you got this prayer rag, you touch the cloth, put it on your forehead or anything like that. But it's simply she's reaching out by faith. And she touches his clothes, and she was made whole. She would not let anything stop her from getting to Jesus. But notice, she was the only one that reached out with faith. All the others were touching her, but the only one that was healed by faith was just this one woman. Everybody is thronging him. Everybody is touching him. But it says when she touched him, listen, it says the fountain of her blood, it drew up. Verse 31, and his disciples said unto him, seest thou the multitude thronging thee, and thou say, who touched me? And they look round about and see her that had done this thing. It was Peter that spoke up and said, Lord, what are you talking about? Who touched me? Everybody is touching you. They're thronging him. They got him compressed, and he turns and says, who touched me? It almost seems like he's bipolar. You got 50, 60, 70, maybe 100, 150 people touching you, and you turn around and say, who touched me? Her priorities had changed. We see her real faith. She said, only if I can get to Jesus, only if I can get to Jesus, I know that I'll be healed. I know that I'll be saved. And he works a miracle in her life. And ought to be the mindset of us today, that we ought not wait until something bad happens to thank God. We ought to thank God simply for waking us up this morning, starting us on our way. We ought to thank God just for not the clothes in our closet, but just the clothes on our backs. See, some people didn't have a place to sleep last night. Some people don't have extra clothes where people don't know where the next meal is coming from. Say, no one was cured but this lady. Now, Jesus is on his way to Jairus' house. She comes through the press, touched him, and Jairus stops, turns, and says, who touched me? Jesus is all-knowing. There's nothing hidden from him. He knows and he sees all. His eyes go to and fro in the world. Jesus sensed that someone had touched him by faith, and he said, who touched me? The text in the Luke text say that virtue or power had left his body. Everyone was touching him, but when this lady touched him, he said, I felt virtue leave my body. She said that when she touched him, she was healed. He knew who it was, but he wanted her to confess publicly. See, God don't want to just be a healer. He don't just want to be our Vastar bank. He don't want to be a vending machine to us. You know, we go to a vending machine and we decide what we want for today. You know, some Funyuns, Cheetos, maybe some M&Ms. You know, God said, I want to be your Savior. So he said he don't just want to be your lucky rabbit's foot. Every time you get in trouble, you show up in church. Every time you get in trouble, you pull your rabbit's foot and you rub it and you say, Lord, I need a blessing. But he wants to be our Savior. He wants us to say that I'm saved and I'm born again and I'm a child of the King. That's what God is looking for. But notice his confession declared in verse 33 and 34, and it says 33, it said, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Now this woman had faith. She kept saying, if I could just touch the hem of his garment. She said, I know I'll be healed. I know I'll be made whole. Jesus knows all about what's going on in her life, but she wanted her to confess it publicly. She fell down before Jesus in total humility and told him all that transpired. Now remember now that Jairus' daughter is sick and she's dying, and Jesus is on the way, and he stops and he says, who touched me? And now this lady is going to tell him everything that happened. But glad ain't like my wife. You'll be there for about 2-3 hours. Remember now, she's dying. Nikki could say, well, let me tell you what happened to me when I was coming home last night. Then she'll say, you know, when I got up this morning, you know, the sun was get to the point. You start in the morning. I got up, the sun was bright. I got up, I brushed my teeth. Give me the short version. So it says she told all that had transpired. She probably laid out doctor after doctor. You know, I went to the cardiologist, the oncologist, the gynecologist. I went to this doctor and this doctor. Here's the address. Here's the name. She told him everything, and I want to know how long did that take. Remind you now, Jairus, she's just standing there. You know, saying, come on, Jesus. You know, I mean, she got a problem, but that can wait. She's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. Another 35 minutes ain't gonna kill her. Just let's move on. But it says all of her suffering, all the doctors, maybe all that she told what had happened, but she says that I've been healed by faith, not just a physical condition, but a mind, body, and so many seek physical health and wealth from Jesus from a physical standpoint, but that which is spiritual is far from it. You got folks that go to the healing ministry. You might be healed, but that don't mean you saved. Because just like the 10 lepers, only one was made whole. All 10 was cleansed, but only one was cleansed and saved. So that's why you have to be careful when you go to these healing ministries. You may get healed, but that don't mean you got saved. It says she was made whole from her infirmity, and also spiritually she was made whole. Now this is what you find on TBN. They'll teach you how to bribe God, how to pimp God, and getting God to do what you want God to do. You want, like Benny Hinn, whatever one said, that God is my holy banker. I go to God and I demand God to fill my bank account. Now that's what you call a new fool. And that's what folks want today. They want God to be there when they want him there. But he said, I don't want to just be your banker. I don't want to just be your healer. I want to be your Savior and your Lord. But she was saved as a result of her faith. The same faith also healed her physical malady that she suffered for 12 years. Now Jairus is standing there as they are walking with him, and the journey was stopped by this dear woman. Now they're just standing there. You know, his heart is probably just pounding. You know, and now we're waiting. The lady have just told her whole life story. Now that probably could have taken anywhere from 30, 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what type of person she was. Hopefully she was shy and didn't do a whole lot of talking. But he's there. His heart is pounding. It's Jesus, don't you know? You know, this is an emergency. You know, I understand that. I'm in it too. You know, but that can wait for a few minutes. He says, my situation is urgent. My situation, I'm in trouble. My daughter is dying, and he watches her perform the greatest miracle in this woman's life. And the delay was served as a test for Jairus' faith. You know, oftentimes, God put us in what is called God's waiting room. Waiting for you ever had to be there, you had to wait for the results of a test. You had to sit in the waiting room and wait for the surgery, or maybe we was in the waiting room. We've been praying for a child to get saved, and we're sitting there waiting for that child to come to God. And oftentimes we may say, God, what exactly are you doing? You ever had that happen before? What are you doing? And many times God keeps us there in the waiting room for us to recognize that God has all power and that we must rely on him. Psalms 121 says, look to the hill, because from the hill cometh our help. All our help comes from the Lord. God said he'll never leave us, nor will he forsake us. See, we have to be able to accept God's will. Whatever it is, it's not my will, but it's God's will. But notice the desperate condition recorded, the delay carefully revealed. But notice thirdly, the devastating communication received. Notice the communication delivered there in verse 35. And it says, while he yet spake, I like that. So as he was speaking to the lady with the issue of blood, as he was saying, listen, daughter, you know, thy faith has made thee whole. Go thy way in peace and be whole of thy plague. And it says, while he was yet speaking, there come the ruler of the synagogue's house, certain which said, thy daughter is dead. Why trouble the master any further? So he brought him this bad news. You know, this the news that don't nobody, you know, want to hear. They say your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the master any further. This is like news we never want to hear. All of our praying and hoping, you know, that your daughter will get healed or be made whole has all vanished. He gets the news and says that she is dead. He stood waiting while he healed this woman. And maybe Jairus say, well, only if you would have came. You know, God has power over death. Lazarus was dead for 4 days. There was one processional. Can you imagine that you have a body and you're on your way to the cemetery? Jesus shows up and just raised the dead boy out of the casket. Give the child back to the mother. Just stop the processional. He has power over death, disease, demons, and also distance. Like the centurion say, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just speak the word and it shall come to pass. But she is dead. Nothing can be done. Have you ever stood and the doctor ever said that there's nothing that we can do? The situation is hopeless. I remember with my grandmother, the doctor, I don't know, they pushed me up there as the leader. So he said, well, you know, Mr. Edwards, it's Friday. Your grandma's not going to make it through the weekend. I said, okay. All right, thanks for that. Thanks for the information, Doc. So we went along 2 years later. 2 years later, God brought that back to my attention that he said she wasn't going to make it till Sunday. But 2 years later, see, it doesn't matter what the doctor said. It matters what the great physician said, what Jesus said. But notice the conciliation directed at 36. And it says, as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said unto the ruler of the synagogue, be not afraid, only believe. Now, Jesus did not say, don't believe what they saying. That's not what he said. He said, only believe, and, you know, and have faith. He didn't say, don't believe what they're saying. You know, the child is not dead. That's not what Jesus said. The child is dead. But in essence, what did Jesus not say? He didn't say, well, there's no point in me going. You know, I'll be praying for you, brother. You have my condolences. Give them to the family for me. No, Jesus didn't say that. So regardless of the news or what the doctor has to say, he says, keep on believing that God is still seated on the throne. See, it's easy to have faith when nothing's wrong. When you got more money than you have months. When your husband is acting right, or your wife is acting right, your children is acting right. You know, life is good, it's easy, but if you take all of that away, is there faith? Remember Job? Job lost everything. And Job said, yet though he slay me, yet will I trust him. See, he proved listen, that Jesus is a way of escape. He's a way out. Now, he may have thought in his mind that, you know, you don't care about me, and because if you did care about me and my daughter, you would have hurried along, or you would have said, excuse me, he's first and you're second. I'll get to you in a minute. You know, sometimes we have to be patient. Like we was talking, you know, and oftentimes it may be your time, but it's not your turn. I remember playing football, and you know, after we played football, you know, we all go to the water fountain. Now it's out my time to get water, but I have to wait my turn. Oftentimes we get mad because I applied for the job first. You know, you can't. My resume is bar none. I mean, it's excellent, and you know, I was the first one. But sometimes we have to be patient. We have to stand in line, like one preacher say. Well, if he's blessing the person that's next to me, well, he's in my neighborhood, so I need to just be patient. But a lot of times, see, Jairus probably was thinking, you know, I'm first. And you should have just said, listen, you know, excuse me, but it's bad to interrupt. It's bad that, you know, you need to just hold up. I get to you. Give me about 10, 30 minutes. Let me do this. And I'll come back. But there's a reassurance. He said, stop fearing and unbelief. Just keep on believing. See, there's no limits when it comes to God. Even though the child that they say is dead, but there's no limit to God. Like the angel said to Mary, you know, is there anything too hard for God? We talked about the desperate condition revealed, the delay carefully recorded, the devastating communication received, and finally, notice the dead child raised. Notice the commotion displayed there in 37 and 38. And he suffered that no man shall follow him, save Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and he seeth the tumult and them that weep and wail greatly. Now, when in the old days, when you died, they would hire people to come cry. You remember on Good Times? Wanda went to every funeral. Didn't know who the person was. She just went there. She walked in and she just started crying. Didn't know who it was. But back in the old days, they would hire people. You know, they would hire people to come in and cry. You know, they got a new thing now. I was thinking about getting into it, but Nikki might not like it. But they got this thing called cuddling. You ever seen that before? They hire people to come and cuddle with you. Now, that's a bad idea. That's just me speaking. You're a woman, you want a man to come and cuddle you. Before long, you don't want a more than cuddle. I think that's a bad idea, but that's a popular position now today. People just want you to come and cuddle with them. You know, I done lost my whole train of thought what I was even thinking about. But to me, that's one of the dumbest things I ever seen in my life. You don't know these people, but you're gonna let them. I mean, cuddle. That's not cuddle. Mean cuddle. You know, they laying in the bed, they all cuddling, and you don't know this person, but this is my job to go somewhere and cuddle with somebody. But anyway, the child was dead because of not only that they said the child was dead, but he said they wept and the mourners were there. That's another sign to show that the child in reality is dead. But notice he didn't say call CNN like Trump fake news. You know, he didn't say get the footage, go get the internet, get your Facebook Live. We're going to go in here and raise the dead, but I want all this. No, he put them all out of the room. So you have to be careful about who you talk about when you get a blessing, because see, everybody ain't I know it ain't the right word, but ain't happy when you get blessed. You know, they may smile in your face, but up under their skin, you know, a lot of folks ain't happy. You know, that should have been my job. That should have been, you know, my position. That should have been my house. That should have been my husband. That should have been, you know, my wife. And we can go on, and folks ain't happy. A lot of times we just get downright mad. Let's just tell the truth. We get mad. But notice there, he said, put them all out. You know, you have to be careful. He did not allow the crowd to enter into the house. So Jesus watched as the people had a sense of despair, of loss, with no control over the situation. But notice the confrontation depicted there, 39 and 40, and I'm almost done. And it says, and when he was come in, he said unto them, why ye maketh ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. In verse 40 it says, and they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and then were with them, and they entered where the damsel was, was lying. Listen. He simply says, as he walked in the room, now this is Jesus, he said, what are y'all crying for? She's not dead. And they probably looked at him and said, what's wrong with this guy? You know, she's dead. She's been pronounced dead. You can see she's dead. She's probably had, beginning to change colors. You got the mourners, the wailers there. And Jesus walked in. Why all y'all crying? Why is this ado? She's not dead. She simply is asleep. See, but they laughed at him. This is proof that she was dead. By the presence of the mourners, when Jesus said she is asleep, they scorned him because they knew she was dead. And it wasn't a possibility. They knew for a fact that this girl was dead. When Jesus used the term asleep, it was then now they scorned, they laughed at him. But notice, listen, the command declared 41 through 43, and I close. At one moment the girl was a corpse. She was pale. She was lifeless. And now she's walking around filled with life, health, and with vigor. Verse 41 says, and he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which means damsel arise, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway, notice that word straightway, that means immediately the damsel arose and walked, for she was 12 years old, so that simply means she knew how to walk. And they were astonished with great astonishment. And he charged them straightly that no man should know it, and command that something should be given to her to eat. At 1 minute she was dead. She probably was pale, had turned colors, and now life and vigor was in her. Her parents were overjoyed because their child was alive. But let me do three things, and then I'll close with that. Notice the extraordinary power that Jesus had. Jesus simply commanded her to stand up. It wasn't no mumbo jumbo. It wasn't performing the exorcism. They had to come back the next day. He didn't do all that gobbledygook that you find. He simply spoke the word, damsel arise, Talitha cumi, and she immediately, straightway, she arose. See, God has all power over life and over death. So he just demonstrated to the lady with the issue of blood that God has power over disease, and also he demonstrated that God has power over death. Listen, in their eyes, she was dead, but in the eyes of our Savior, that simply means she was simply asleep. The charge considered, he said, tell no one what was done. Like I said earlier, God does not want to be known as our healer, our holy banker, a vending machine to us. He wants to be our Savior. So he said, don't go tell. It was already a crowd. They already wanted to make him king. And he said, this is not the reason that I came. Luke chapter 19, verse 10, the dissertation with Zacchaeus, he says, I come to seek and to save them that was lost. The purpose for Jesus coming was to save humanity, not to be your holy banker. not to be the one that heals you. He's the one that saves you. Notice, by no ordinary means. He said, and give her some food. That's the evidence of life is hunger. When you have a baby, now the evidence of that baby being alive, the baby has a hunger. And if you've never been around one, you know what? And they're going to cry till they get what they want. When a child is hungry, he's going to cry till you feed it. This is evidence of life is hunger. If you show me, show me a person that does not hunger for the word, that does not want to be in the presence of the word, I don't want to be where the word is being proclaimed, I show you a person that's lost. Because if you're spiritually alive, the proof is that you will have a desire for a hunger for the word. If there's no hunger spiritually, that means you're not alive spiritually. If you show me a person that want to read the word, want to be in church, I show you a person that's saved. That's the desire. It is the show of the evidence. Is hunger. When she got up, now she was dead. Now to prove to them that she's alive, she said, give her something to eat. Because you know what? Dead people don't eat. Now, have you ever seen a dead person sit at the table and eat a dinner? So that's proof to them that the child is alive. Not only did she eat, but she walked. So she got up, she walked, and said, give her something to eat. Yeah, I don't know how long she had been laying there, but that's proof positive that now she is alive. He wanted to show them. He wanted to show them, but when we're saved, we're new creatures in Christ. Jesus said that she is alive. When we have crisis in our lives, when the problem comes, we must keep on trusting and believing in God. I don't care how bad the situation may get. You know, it may get a lot worse before it gets better, but we say keep on believing. He said your child is dead, but Jesus told him just keep on believing. You know, I might say, well, believe what? Believe that what? I'm going to the cemetery next week. He said, keep on believing. Let me say this and I'll close. Perhaps today you're seated in God's waiting room and you're waiting for a response from God. Jesus says, keep on believing. Keep on trusting. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. And Jesus will say to us today, as he said to Jairus, just keep on believing. See, we have to put our faith in God. You know, sometimes God tests our faith just to see in order. Sometimes he builds our faith because he could have healed his daughter long time ago, but he waited, just like he waited with Lazarus, because Jairus' faith wasn't strong enough yet. He had to wait till the child died. Then God showed Jairus just who he was. And you know, God is not going to take you out not 1 iota of a second too soon for you to get the glory, or for somebody else to get the glory. You're going to stay in there long enough so when you come out, you're going to say, thanks be to God. If God wasn't on my side, boy, we always say, I don't know how I made it through that. Yeah, you do. You do know, because it was God. My point I want to leave as we close is simply just believe. Amen. Amen. As I said before, as long as God allows me to continue this sermon, finish. The fight was in the room, and the doctor said, my mom said, you got 2 options. You can sit there and die, or you can fight. She said, well, I'm willing to fight, so we're going to finish the fight here. So as long as God says so, we're going to continue with this sermon. If it runs into Resurrection Sunday, and after Resurrection Sunday, we'll pick back up with Ecclesiastes. I hadn't departed that, but sometimes God does intervene in our lives, and we have to understand that and let God have his way. Amen. Amen. Everyone stand.